numbers for order, or are you guys just gonna mix it up?
She's not here to roll the dice.
Okay.
And I don't know how to play dice with just my hands. I never was good at rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah,
So,
once we get rolling, I think we can just alternate.
Sure.
First, second, third.
Yeah, we'll
That's
We can just
current order, it goes 1, 2, and then it can go 3, 2, 1, and then 2, 1, 3, and then 2, 2, 1.
That sounds way too complicated.
And it's way too complicated.
You guys can keep track. That's
Yes.
Hi, all. We were seriously hoping to have Hillary Shugart here to organize this for us. She's not here yet. We figure she'll be here any minute now. But let's start this project, just for fun. I get to read the directions because I have the print, so I can read the directions. And my name is, thank you, that's why Mark is here. My name is Eddie Berry. My introduction is I just retired from Utah State as a professor of sociology and demography. Mark, who are you?
My name is Mark Brunson. I am a professor at Utah State University in the Department of Environment and Society. And we have both, at one time or another, have been active in the Virtual and Audubon Society, which is sponsoring this event.
Good. Furthermore, the reason that Eddie and Mark got called for this project is neither one of us can vote in Logan. So we got no skin in the game, no dogs in the game, no cats in the game.
Any birds in the game?
Audubon.
We do have birds in the game, yeah.
Birds in the game. Okay. The deal was to start with the candidates drawing a number. We're not going to make you do that. We're just going to there are 3 of you, so we can figure out who answered first last time. We'll vary the order in which people answer questions. We'd like you to be able to start with 3 minutes making a statement. Yes, we both have our timers available. We can see a clock. Well, Mark can see the clock. Then we'll go into the question and answer segment. Answers to questions, we're going to ask that they be capped at 2 minutes each because there are a lot of questions. And we want to give the audience plenty of opportunity to include questions, not just us, but what you guys have to ask. I don't know if any were submitted in advance. If you have any written questions, if you bring them over to that little table, we'll make sure that we get them going when the process gets going, okay? And that said, did I miss anything?
Not that I can remember.
Okay. We'll start asking the candidates for their 3-minute statements. We're going to do this in alphabetical order by last name for the first part. After that, I have no idea how it's going to work out. That means, I believe, Amy Anderson, you're up.
So when I was a kid, my maiden name was Zada, so I always went last. So being Anderson is not necessarily something that is my comfort zone, but I've kind of gotten used to it. As I sat down to write an opening statement, my thoughts swirled. I kept circling back to how I got here. Not how I got to Logan. That was a very conscious decision that we made 18 years ago, but how I came to the place of running for re-election to our city council. Like many of you, finding my place in a community meant involvement in our children's schools, from the PTA to serving on all 3 levels of school community councils. Finding my place meant involvement in my faith community, working with an ecumenical youth group. It meant saying yes when asked to volunteer for local nonprofits. It even meant joining a bowling league. It meant connecting with people across our city from all types of backgrounds and situations. In 2013, when Tom Jensen resigned from the city council, I was encouraged to apply for the vacancy appointment. Needless to say, I was not chosen. But being asked to consider it opened a whole new avenue of service for me. I began to follow city council meetings and decisions with greater attention. I attended the occasional planning commission meeting to understand how our city was growing. I began to focus on my responsibilities as the city of Logan in a new way. To me, a great city is measured by the quality of life of the people who live in it. How would you define quality of life? Through my service to our community, I've grown to understand that there is no single answer. For you, it might be financial security, access to recreation, or a diverse community. For your parents, opportunity for family time, health, or a quiet neighborhood. Your neighbor could answer educational growth or artistic freedom. As decisions have been made during my tenure on council, being mindful of the variability of needs and ideas throughout our city has guided me, working to ensure all citizens can achieve their defined quality of life. Quality of life means being valued and heard, and there will always be a need to improve the communication within our city. But the re-energizing of neighborhood councils has been a positive step, but there is always more that we as a city can do and more we as citizens can do. Quality of life means safety and services. With Chief Jensen, I established use of force review monthly, bringing citizen oversight and increasing communication between the council and police. Authorizing funding for capital projects, for environmental and public works, power and light projects has all ensured we have the services we need, which is ultimately the city's responsibility. Zoning is integral to supporting our neighborhoods. As we reviewed our future land use plan, rewrote our mixed-use development guidelines, rezoned downtown with Town Center 1 and 2, I have worked to ensure that housing growth meets the needs of residents at different stages of life and household type. As chair during the public hearings on the Center Block project, many voices were heard, and the city stepped back to reevaluate and realign the plans to create a vibrant gathering space. My background in mediation affirmed to me the ability to hear and understand that what matters to others is part of the process. When our national politics is often labeled as divisive, I view our ability to work together as a city council and the staff as positive. That's why today I ask for your vote for city council, because I believe I have a lifetime of experience and a track record of cooperation and commitment.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. You ran over.
I read slower than I did when I practiced this earlier.
You're up.
I'm up. Okay, great. I'll be a little shorter, so hopefully I can make up some of the time. But my name is Keegan Garrity, and I didn't necessarily ever peg myself as a politician. I first got involved with this kind of stuff when I attended a neighborhood council meeting, and we were talking about the trail system. And I made an observation about the trail system, and it got me wondering, how are decisions made in the city? Who makes them, and how do they do that? And as I continued to attend meetings and stay involved, it was almost like a sweater that I had pulled the string on that kind of kept unraveling. And I thought, I think it's important that people who ride the bus make decisions about the bus, or people that go to the library a couple times a week are involved in making decisions about the library, or people whose kids swim at the aquatic center are involved in changes to the aquatic center. And I thought, I think there's a way where we could get a little bit more people involved and get more people represented. So one of the things that I've been an advocate for is geographic-based elections for council members. I served on a committee, the neighborhood district, I guess it was called the Neighborhood Districting Committee, and we looked at where people were elected from. And what we found is of the 6 neighborhoods, only 2 neighborhoods really dominated. There's only been 2 people elected from the other 4 neighborhoods in Logan in the last 13 years. So I think that's one of the things we could do, is get more representation on the council. So that's one of the things I'd advocate for. Another one is fiscal responsibility. One of the things that I take interest in is how our tax dollars are spent. So we have a thing called the RDA, Redevelopment Agency. And in the last 18 months, there's been $16 million allocated through that. And I wondered how that's all been spent. I looked for it on the website, it wasn't there. So I emailed Kirk Jensen, our Economic Development Director, and he sent me an email with a spreadsheet. So I shared that with other people, but I think that's something that can be made more transparent. And the last thing I want to talk about is smart growth. I think we all don't like traffic, we don't like parking, and we don't like air pollution. And I think one way we can eliminate those things is to make sure that where we build is within walking distance of some of those amenities. Right now we're considering ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and I think one of the places we can put those is over by the university, which is the #1 employer and where a lot of people travel to work and school. So those are the things that I'd like to accomplish if I'm elected to the city council. Thanks.
Thank you. You are up.
My name is Ernesto Lopez, and thank you for the invitation for being here and being part of this forum. I've been here in the Valley for 22 years, since 1999, shortly after moving from Mexico. I'm the first immigrant, the first Hispanic to serve in the City Council. I'm very proud of being able to serve the city and its community through the City Council. I have a track record of serving the community for many, many years, as early as being a college student, serving as a tutor, as a mentor in multiple schools here in the Valley, from South Cache to Mountain Crest. I've been able to visit a lot of the other schools here in the Valley, Logan High, Ridgeline, Mount Logan. So I'm passionate about involving the youth and inspiring them to strive for higher goals. And I've always believed myself, my wife could witness to this, that there may be other people who may be better servants than I am, that could potentially do a better job. But if this is the best way that I can serve my community, I'd be delighted to do that. So one of the things that I would like to help support if I were to be re-elected is to continue to encourage business growth in the city. Also to encourage civic engagement. As Keegan was saying, there seems to be a part of our constituents who are not as engaged in elections as they could be. So I would love to pursue an education campaign to help them be more engaged and be more part of the local government. And to also give a voice to those that may feel underrepresented, underserved. I feel like I am a great candidate to do that. So.
Thank you. Thank you all three very much. I'm going to let Mark start the questioning.
Great. So this is an event sponsored by Riverside Trail Society. It is, so we're going to focus, there are a lot of issues that we could focus on that are important to the city of Logan, and you've heard from the candidates a number of those already. We will focus primarily on issues related to the environment and to nature and space, open space and things like that. So the first question that I have is the American Lung Association has some data which suggests that Logan is the 7th most polluted city of 216 metropolitan areas that they measured. What would you like to do to improve air quality? And Keegan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think I'll do the most popular thing to do in Cache Valley, which is to blame California. I mean, obviously there are factors beyond our control, like other states' forest fires. But as I looked into, what this has been an issue that I've investigated, and as I've looked into it, of the factors that cause air pollution, the majority of it comes from mobile uses, which is to say cars and trucks. So the next question then is, okay, how do we reduce driving? How do we get fewer cars on the road? So one of the things I talked about in my opening statement is smart growth. One thing that we want to prevent as we plan for the future is to avoid sprawl. If the city keeps spreading out all the way to Benson, then that means more people have to drive to the city, and that means more pollution, more parking, more traffic, and the things that we don't like, right? I serve on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advocacy Committee, or BPAC for short, and we met today, and we're always looking for ways to get more people walking or riding, and I think one of the accomplishments that UDOT is working on right now and just announced the other day was to do that pedestrian underpass over by the Riverwoods on Main Street, which I think will help keep cars off the road. I also think maybe a little thing that we could do is more electric vehicle chargers in the city, especially if they're powered by solar. I think we could put more bike racks in places. I know there's some by the library, and those are ones that I've taken advantage of. And I think another potential opportunity could be carpool incentives. So it could be something like having a reserved parking space if you carpool. But I don't think there's any magic bullet. I think it's going to take a concerted effort, but those are some of the ideas that I would suggest.
Thanks, and I failed to mention, candidates know this, but for questions, they have 2 minutes. So Keegan got in under the bell there. Ernesto, what would you like to do to improve air quality?
I as Keegan mentioned, it'd probably easy to divide our problem maybe for 2 seasons, one being the summer, one being the winter. Summer, I do feel like is largely out of our control, dealing with smoke that is coming from wildfires and such. Winter, on the other hand, that's probably the one that we can try to pursue and improve a little bit better, right? It is encouraging to know that the EPA recently did improve our ranking or rating when it comes to air quality. So that was probably refreshing for a lot of people who have been frustrated with our air quality issues. So I would love to think that we're moving in the right direction and maybe look at the things that are working correctly or that are helping us improve our air quality so that we can do more of those, right? And I think it's crucial, though, that we work with the rest of the valley. Logan by itself cannot fix this. Logan by itself cannot improve the air quality for every single home in the entire valley and the county. So it's crucial that we can work, create a plan with the county and work towards improving the air quality for everyone.
Thank you. And Amy, it's to you.
So I think it's been noted that living in the valley, there's certain things that are going to make this just incredibly difficult and more complicated for all of us. I think one of the things that we've already been working on, and I think we need to continue, is our partnership and our support of the Cache Valley Transit District. You may all be aware that we just added the blue and green loops that run between the university and both our north and south Walmarts. And if you keep your eyes open and watch those buses, it's been amazing how many more people are utilizing those. So I think that success can hopefully breed more success as we encourage people to get out of their cars. I think one of the interesting comments when people say traffic's so bad, because we do know that that's one of the biggest problems, is like, I'm in traffic. And my newest thing, I'll just say, you are traffic. Like, it's not that you're in traffic. If you are there, that you're part of the problem, and I think we can hopefully make our citizens part of the solution. As Keegan alluded to, that the city has done great things to create a trail system that now connects points where people can bike and walk safely, to use that for active transportation. The $4 million grant from UDOT to put in that pedestrian crossway, which allows us to have a safe passageway. Before it was from 3rd South all the way to the Y, where there was no safe way for people to walk. I think that's going to help. We're in the middle of doing our master transportation plan update, which hopefully will help us alleviate and recognize some of the traffic issues into the next decade. And in our last meeting, we did bring up the fact that with the new guidance for electric vehicle charging stations, what can we as a city do to lead on that? It's going to be a challenge in a community where we have so many rental properties. The market will hopefully dictate that, but I think that we as a city do need to continue to lead in that to help reduce those emissions. And also I think we should all be really proud that the goal that we've had as a community for 50% renewable power, we've actually met. And the projection right now is that we should be at 58% by 2030. So that Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation Board that the city has been active in doing and is pulling people from all over the county on to reduce our reliance on non-renewable sources.
Great, thank you. And Eddie, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. This is kind of a long one. Please bear with me. You've already heard the phrase accessory dwelling units, so here we go. In the interest of preserving open green space, Logan aspires to residential density over urban sprawl. And yet, the accessory dwelling unit ADU ordinance draft stipulates that any ADU must be within the footprint of an owner-occupied single-family home, and specifically prohibits detached units such as tiny houses. Do you support this aspect of the ordinance, or at least as it's currently written? Why or why not? And should the city only aim for availability and not affordability, or vice versa? I'm going to start with Ernesto, please.
As a city council member, we've received plenty of comments regarding ADUs, both in our meetings and also through email. And the vast majority of those comments are concerned with non-owner occupation of a home with an ADU and how that could lead to the detriment of the character of the neighborhood. So for those reasons, I feel strongly that a great starting point for this new ordinance that will take place will be for owner occupation of a home, so that we can minimize that risk of losing stability in the neighborhood, losing character, and of course to still be able to not only fulfill the law that has been put on our plate, and at the same time help with housing affordability or availability. Hopefully the availability will also help decrease the housing costs.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go with Amy.
Okay. So I think it is important to understand that, House Bill 82 is what is prompting the current ordinance as it's written. So that's why it does not include tiny houses, because the state law was related to internal ADUs. So whether or not tiny houses or accessory dwelling units in people's backyards that aren't attached is something that we as a council have not yet approached. I do know that in most communities where they have added those have been added in lower density areas. And I think when the legislation was being discussed, the city of Logan, as well as all the other university towns, were the ones who raised questions with the state as to what that long-term impact would be. University towns do have a very distinct characteristic. And when you look at the areas of Logan that surround the university, some of those are upwards of 80% rental. And so, as Ernesto mentioned, we have had much comment. And I think that the pros for ADUs are that it's affordable housing, that older citizens could bring people into their homes, that they would be less green, less car dependent. And the concern on the other side is that there's parking problems, that property values could be negatively or positively impacted. It could create overcrowding. It can change the nature of the neighborhoods. I mean, these are all different elements. And to look at this from a citywide perspective, I do feel it's appropriate, given the concerns that have been raised by people around the university, to start small and to follow what our planning commission passed, which was to create an area around the university that was exempted, to start small, to see how this works, and hopefully all those positives are indeed true, and we can roll it out to the city in general. But I think for right now, let's stick and be cautious.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so ADUs are something that the city council could have done earlier. So I want to clarify that, because the state is essentially forcing the hand of the city council to have a minimum of 33% of the residentially zoned area be ADUs. We have an affordable housing crisis right now. And so far, that $16 million RDA money that I've referred to earlier, only 4% has gone to housing projects. This is among the top issues right now. We need to allow more ADUs. And if we're thinking that the idea of an ADU is to eliminate parking problems, then let's put them by the university, where the majority of people are going to walk or ride their bike. That's how you eliminate the traffic issues, the parking issues, and the air pollution that we talked about. I would be okay with allocating even more than 33% of the city to do that. And I think of my house, and next to it is a detached garage. It's a barn shape that has a potential loft above it. It's not outfitted for housing now, but it could be, and that could give the person who lives there a private entrance. It could give them a place to live, and they could park underneath it, so it would resolve all those issues. So I think it's short-sighted if we completely restrict that. I also don't think we should open the floodgates and do it everywhere. But I think if we want to take affordable housing seriously, we need to do more than what we're doing right now.
So we were given an opportunity for rebuttal, and may I take a couple of minutes to address some of the comments that Keaton raised? Go for it. So I think for me, when I look at that parking issue with ADUs and the university, we have a parking issue up at the university because students bring cars that they park. So whether they're utilizing them during the day or not, I think that to me is ultimately what the biggest complaint in the Adams neighborhood has been, and on the eastern edge of Hillcrest, is that homes are occupied by students, their cars sit there, and if you have a home with just one driveway parking spot and you convert it to an ADU, the car will still be there, there will still be a parking problem. So I agree at one element that having it be walkable to help with those air quality impacts is legitimate. I still don't think that alleviates and resolves the entire parking problem with ADUs close to the university.
I was going to ask, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, I think one of the key things about this new ordinance will be that in a year or so we can look back and evaluate how things turned out for all of the areas where we implement the option for an ADU, and then we can say, hey, this is actually working better than we expected, let's expand it. And if it's not working, then let's really look at the things that we need to fix in the implementation, the execution of the ordinance, so that we can improve the situation and reduce those effects.
Megan?
Yeah.
So one of those stipulations of ADUs is that they are owner occupied. So the scenario that was described of a bunch of college students living in a house, that's non-existent. That's a narrative that doesn't exist. Another narrative is that ADUs are just for college students. They're not. There are a lot of people that work at USU, and you could, I mean, imagine a scenario where a young couple is trying to afford a house and they can't quite make it work, so they buy a house, and then to supplement the income to make repairs on it, they rent it out to someone. Now they're going to be very interested in the longevity of that house and making sure that it can be rented for a long time and that they can live in it for a while.
Okay, we're going to leave that one there. But thank you all for, we had 1 minute for rebuttal and everybody got in well under that, so thanks very much. The next question goes in a different direction. Many people believe there's a serious threat to public health and safety due to feral cats in Logan. There have been cats that have been euthanized due to rabies exposure. There are issues with birds. And there's no requirement to license cats. So some pet owners mistakenly believe that means they don't have to vaccinate them either. And they may not know that the city animal control ordinance prohibits free-ranging domestic cats. So the question is, do you believe that both dog and cat owners alike should be required to license their animals as a potential solution? And I'm going to start with Amy.
So I do not own pets. I will start with that, so I do not have a free-ranging cat. I think one of the questions I would have with licensing is that just because cats are licensed doesn't necessarily mean that it ensures that both community cats or owned cats would be spayed or neutered or vaccinated. So I'm not sure it would necessarily improve the public health element of that, depending on how the licensure was, or address cat populations, or even reduce the number of cats that are brought to shelter. So from a public health perspective, I'm not convinced that licensing would work, and I would also have some concerns about how that would be set up and enforced. You know, enforcement of things is always a big issue within cities. I do know that the city itself right now is continuing to work with Canyon View Veterinary. We've been doing trap and release with them. It's based on a complaint basis. My understanding is that there's not a large volume of cats that are being brought in on that. But ultimately, responsible ownership of your pet is the most important piece of this. So to me, an education program encouraging owners to chip their cat, because that's a big part of it. So if a cat is found to be straying far away, that it could be returned to its owner, and it would also identify cats that are frequently doing so that the city would be aware that somebody has a free-range cat that has a problem. I know I'm looking forward to the county facility that's underway, which is something that the city is planning on working with as well, so that we can continue to manage both our dog and our cat issues. But I'd like to just see some more information on how licensing could truly impact that public health perspective that the question raised.
Okay. Keegan?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about enforcement as well. If you ask this officer back here what he spends the most time on, I'm guessing he would say two things that start with a P: pets and parking. And if you ask our residents what they want our officers to spend time on, I suspect those two things would not be the answer. So I would, just to be clear, I would not advocate for registration of cats. What we do have, though, is Tnr Program. Has anyone heard of that? It stands for Trap, Trap, Neuter, and Release. Yeah. And what they do after that, by the way, I didn't know we'd be talking about vaccine mandates here. I was about to mention cats getting vaccinated, but that's such a hot topic, I might not even mention that. But what that does is they trap them, they sterilize them, vaccinate them, and then they tip their ear so you can look at them from far away even at night and see that they've been taken care of in that program. I think it was 2 years ago, a private donor donated a few $1,000s to help with that program. That's a program I would advocate for continuing, and I think that's one where we could probably even solicit donations to help fund that and keep that going.
Ernesto?
Yes, I am a pet owner. I have a dog, and I've actually firsthand witnessed the marvel of the whole chipping device and how it works, and it works well. I'm thankful that my dog is chipped and that we actually retrieved him not too long ago from an event where he wasn't home. But I have also witnessed lack of control, of animal control, in a city such as Tijuana, where I grew up. And unfortunately, I do believe that at some point, when we look at things like this, we have to be prepared to say when this number of events or situations hit this number, then we need to take action. I think we cannot just say, yeah, we're never gonna need to do this. I think at some point there may be a point where we have to act and implement something like this.
Thanks.
Any rebuttal requests?
No rebuttal.
Okay. Then we're ready for the next one. This one's on light pollution. And light pollution is a leading cause of death for migratory birds. We're right in the middle of migration season, even as we speak. The City Council passed an ordinance for down-pointing street lighting in accordance with dark skies values. Is it time for Logan to pass the dark skies ordinance, as have Nibley and Smithfield? And I'm going to start with Ernesto.
I wasn't part of the city council when that ordinance passed. I would be interested in knowing what Nibley and what was the other one? Smithfield, what drove them to pass that ordinance in their cities and what effects it has had. What are the pros and the cons for that? As a photography enthusiast, I appreciate when I'm able to take the photographs that I'm envisioning. So I can see how people that enjoy those types of hobbies would appreciate an ordinance that would help them enjoy the outdoors a little bit better. But I would probably need to know more about what are the effects and the pros and the cons that such an ordinance would bring to the city and the people.
Thank you. Keegan.
Yeah, so I'll speak to why the Nibley one was enacted. So I don't know if any of you have been out to Firefly Park and seen the fireflies there. It's really cool. I didn't even know we had them here till not too long ago. But one of the reasons is I guess light prevents them from reproducing. They prefer it to be dimly lit, I guess, like the rest of us. But so they passed that ordinance so that way that would protect that area, kind of the natural area. As far as Logan goes, you know, I enjoyed the Perseids meteor shower I guess it was mid-August. I don't know if any of you saw that. It's pretty cool if you go out there at 3 or 4 in the morning, you can see a bunch of shooting stars. But one of the first things I did was leave the city, right? And I think that's a common expression, like let's leave the city lights. So while I do think, you know, photography is important, preserving nature is important, I don't think that Logan City is where I'd have that kind of restriction. I think I'd leave that for maybe some of the more rural areas.
Okay.
So I know that the Logan City ordinance on lighting is limits our light poles at 32 feet, which is actually the same as Nibley's. So my understanding of our city ordinance right now are that they are pretty well in line with most dark skies ordinances. Any project that comes through planning and zoning needs to abide by those dark skies. So if you ever go back and look at minutes from planning and zoning, when they look at usage, they'll identify that it does meet that. That's a requirement. So I think we do already have pretty good guidelines for that in a community of our size. I'm not familiar with what other additional guidelines there might be that separate us from Nibley or from Smithfield. I would certainly be willing to look at those and see if it's something that would work for the city of Logan. You know, but we do have, you know, the candle limitations. We do have identified things to reduce the negative impact of glare, of excessive illumination, and those have all been in place, I want to say, since 2012 or 2013. So, again, I'd be curious just to see what Nibley's and Smithfield's ordinances have that varies greatly from what we have.
Thank you. You're up.
I am. So, I think probably all of us have noticed we're in a drought. Climate change projections suggest that there would be a shortage of water for cities in Cache Valley and throughout Utah. As a council member, what ordinances do you think might be enacted to reduce water use in the city? And I'm going to start with you, Keegan.
Yeah, so there's a program that exists right now, I think they call it Flip the Strip, where you can be incentivized to do local scaping or xeriscaping. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but basically what it involves is replacing your lawn that requires watering and mowing. We talked about pollution earlier. Lawnmowers aren't a huge source of pollution, but they're a contributing factor. But what we could do is possibly as a city offer incentives to replace a lawn with local vegetation that's drought resistant, those sort of plants. It wouldn't eliminate all of the issues, and I don't think every person would take advantage of it, maybe 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 houses, but you know, we can do what we can to make a difference. And I realize that residential watering doesn't account for, you know, probably accounts for what, 15% of the total watering. A lot of it's in ag. But I know those farmers are incentivized heavily. They rely on their crops for their livelihood. So I know they have sprinklers that are on timers and Wi-Fi controlled. So I think they're already probably trying to maximize efficiency. So I see residential as a low-hanging fruit that we could do to tackle that issue.
Thanks. Ernesto.
Yes, I actually like what Keegan said. I would encourage a type of a program where we could incentivize individuals or homeowners to plan their landscaping in that is more drought friendly. As you probably have heard in multiple avenues, that the drought that we're experiencing is not going anywhere probably in the near future. Just this last weekend I read a very long article about how many other counties in the state, not only in Utah, but also Nevada and Colorado and Arizona, are looking at extreme drought and the effects that it's going to have everywhere, not only in their economy, but in their lifestyles. And I would hate for Logan to be unprepared. And so I would encourage our city to develop a strategic plan with key measures that we need to be looking at so that we can be better prepared and take action, preventative action rather than reactive action to a drought problem.
And Amy?
So you all may be aware that Governor Cox did ask all cities and municipalities to consider implementing water restrictions. He also asked all of us to look at developing a drought response plan. So I would think that is something as a city that we should ensure that we have in place. I would think that part of that would be to look at our parking strip guidelines as they exist now, because we do have a certain requirement of the amount of green space that are required in parking strips. Even though the city owns them, people are responsible for those. The Flip the Strip program is a really interesting one. It is state funded. And my one concern would be that if Logan City has one, then our residents would not be eligible for the state funding. So my approach would be to approach our state legislatures to ensure that they continue to fund that, they increase the funding for that, so that the burden doesn't fall upon our city budget, but that we share that responsibility with the rest of the state for that Flip the Strip program. In fact, I'm not even sure that this year residents of Logan were eligible for it. I do think it's a fantastic idea though. But again, as we look at maybe having that drought plan, when would water restrictions kick into place? But then again, back to that, it's not really an effort, it's enforcement. It has an F. We would have to make sure that how do we do enforcement? And because the city of Logan has that mix of culinary water and canal water, just as we've had with occupancy in areas where there's some buildings are grandfathered in and others aren't, I think it could become difficult if you make that on a complaint basis, that someone could complain that their neighbor is watering, but if they're on the canal system, they may have a different system than a private home that's using culinary. So again, I think that idea of having a drought response plan for our city is an important one, and I would hope that we as the city would follow Governor Cox's recommendation and create one.
Does anybody have an interest in rebutting? Okay, great. I want to remind folks who are out here listening that if you do have a question, you could bring it up and then we can read it. But we're nearing the end of the time for the city council candidates. And since no one is rushing up here, we have one more question, which Eddie's going to ask, and then we'll give everybody a chance to say something at the end.
If you have a question, really, seriously, do bring it up here. We'd be delighted to work with you. Okay, this is the cool question. I got lucky. I got to be the last one. So the 2022 City of Logan budget is nearly $200 million. If Logan received a $1 million grant to use for the city, any way your heart desired, what would you do with that? Let's start with Amy.
So one of the things that I have accomplished since I've been on the city council is adding to the responsibilities of the council a seat on the homeless coordinating council. And I was excited to be able to appoint myself to that for this year. So to me, that $1 million, I would use that to conduct a study of what the greatest needs are for those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness here in our community. A capacity building study, I think that could be done for probably between $10,000 and $25,000, so that we could really identify what those greatest needs are. Is it low or very low income housing? Is it permanent supportive housing, which is it's a housing situation for somebody who may be coming out of addiction or out of mental health situation where they're in a housing situation that has case management to help ensure that they can remain independent. is our greatest need emergency housing. For example, for families who may be at the risk of eviction or not be able to make rent, or a family that's divorcing and now all of a sudden a single mom has to have a place that she can live with her child. I think that capacity building study to identify what that greatest need would be, I would then encourage us to use that $1 million to help meet that need. I know we've had conversations in the city about some property that's owned by a city that's currently vacant, that would be an ideal spot for some either low or moderate income housing. But before a decision is made, we should truly know what our greatest need is. So that would be my $1 million answer, would be to address those needs of those that might be in greatest need in our community for housing.
Thank you.
When I was thinking of this question, there were quite a few things that came to my mind, but all of them, unfortunately, would require probably more than $1 million, right? It used to be that $1 million was a lot of money. I don't think that's the case anymore, unfortunately. But regardless, I think you can still do a lot of good things with $1 million. And so in my mind, I would love to create a program for small businesses, for creation of new businesses. A type of incubator, per se, where people that don't have access to funding could potentially use those funds to grow their idea, to secure more funding if needed. I believe those would be beneficial to Logan, creating more jobs, well-paying jobs, and attracting other types of industries and businesses to the city.
Thank you. Keegan.
Yeah, if I was running for re-election, I'd probably say something that would make me popular with everybody, like I'll pay for everyone to smother their burrito at Cafe Rio for the next year or something. But the ideas I have probably aren't like the most extravagant, but man, I am so tired of driving on 6 West, like where Badger is, up to Airport Road, and I think if everyone chipped in and paid for that, then that would supplement the cost that we have to repair our shocks on our car every year. I don't know if that would take the full $1 million, but if I had any left, I would deploy a survey every year, and that survey would be for public servants, and I would ask all the residents. It would be a simple random survey that would say, hey, do you feel represented? Are your needs met? Because I think as public servants, sometimes it's easy to forget that who we're serving, and that's the people. You know, we're beholden to them. They employed us, not the other way around, and that would help balance that out. The last thing is, if we had any left, this is an issue that I've been advocating for a couple of years. The trail goes under 10th West by Icon that goes out to Trapper Park, and every year it's flooded from about March to June. And I know we almost got it done. There was $50,000 allocated to fix that, and we found out it was going to cost more. And man, I would love to get that just done once and for all, because I think we do really well with the north-south travel, but sometimes the east and west isn't so good. And now that this pedestrian thing's going under Main Street, that would allow you to take the trail all the way out to Trapper Park, and soon to be even further out to Menden, which I think would be really great.
Thank you, all three. It's a fun question, to be honest. We have a question from the audience, but we think we're going to combine it with our request for the final 2 minutes from you folks. Take it away, Mark.
So yeah, what we'd like to do is give each candidate a chance to say one last time, whatever they'd like people to know for 2 minutes. But somewhere in those 2 minutes, could you share what you can provide to the Logan Municipal Council that perhaps others may not be able to do? So with that, I'm going to start with Ernesto.
As I mentioned earlier, I feel privileged to be able to serve on the City Council, especially being the first immigrant, the first Hispanic to do so. I truly believe that we live in a land of opportunity. And I want to open doors for other individuals like me who could see serving in our local government and and maybe they have never even thought about it, but they could potentially be even much better served than I am. And so I would love to do that. Why do I bring to the City Council a diverse point of view? There are many things that I probably agree with our current City Council, our government, but there are other things that maybe haven't come up in discussion that I would love to give my input that and bring a point of view that is different to everyone else.
Thank you. And since we're going in reverse order from the first set, Keegan, you're up next.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I could talk about, but I want to talk about representation. And speaking of offering an alternative point of view, you've seen decisions in the city made lately, and a lot of them on the council have been unanimous. One of those was the splash pad downtown, which I think is one idea for downtown that we could have done. As I talk to people, 100% of the people are not on board with that decision, maybe not even 50%. And where was that represented on the council? It wasn't. And there's a reason why that is. As I alluded to in my opening statement, there's 6 neighborhoods in Logan as designated by elementary school boundaries, and the majority of candidates come from those areas. I served on a committee that evaluated this. We looked at 20 years of historical data, and that's what we found. But we haven't gotten it done. The committee that I served on there was one person from each neighborhood, and 5 of the 6 of us recommend that we change our current at-large system to one that's district-based or a hybrid system. And the council has not done it. You'll hear that they need to look into it more. It's a classic stalling tactic. 2 years ago, this issue was raised, and last year, the supermajority of the committee I served on recommended it. You'll hear excuses such as we need to wait on the census data. The census data is available. It came out last month. You'll hear we don't know how to draw boundaries. You can draw boundaries. If you did 3 districts, you could base them on the county council. If you did 5 districts, you could base it on the school board. So that excuse doesn't exist either. You'll hear that we're worried people won't run for council. There's only 3 of us right now. I'm the only one challenging the incumbency. That's not a reason either. You'll also hear that we need to, maybe a solution is to increase outreach, and maybe if we do more outreach, we'll get people to participate and vote more. Well, I guarantee the 2 people sitting next to me are not going to work harder on outreach or getting people to vote than they are during the campaign. So we need to change our system to one that provides someone from each part of the city to be represented.
Okay, neither one of us know how to work it.
Okay, Amy.
So I appreciate Keegan's passion on that topic. Rather than take all of my time to talk about myself, I just want to quickly address one of my concerns with that is just right now as a resident of Logan, you have the opportunity to vote for all 5 city council members in a city our size, as opposed to voting for 1 representative. So as we make decisions for our community, that would be a question I would have for our citizenry is, would you prefer to vote on all 5 representatives or 1? And given the size of our community, we do have some diversity, but we also have a lot more in common. And so I firmly believe that we need to continue to look at this as our city grows, as that census data has been brought to us, to see whether or not we do need to change. But I guess I just don't see the urgency that Mr. Garrity does. One of the things I do bring to council is the experience I've had over the past 4 years. There's been many challenges that have faced us. I don't know that everybody appreciates how difficult it was to operate as the chair during the time of COVID. Access to our citizens and their ability to reach out to us was really compromised. The fact that I have a background in mediation and was able to bring people together, I'm a great listener. I also ask great questions. I'm diligent. I have flexibility in my work to be able to be here for meetings that happen at 10 o'clock, at 12 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, at 7 o'clock at night. I'm not sure that all the other candidates have that. So if you want someone who's going to be a bulldog, who's going to work for you, but is also going to have the compassion and the ability to listen and to reach compromise with people, I think we're all better served when we can come to a consensus on a decision than when we have dissent.
Okay, thank you very much, and I would like to thank all 3 of our city council candidates one last time.
You guys don't want to move to Logan then?
We're thinking.
We will hear from the two mayoral candidates next. But before we do that, let's take a quick break. Let's take a 5-minute break, since it looks like it's 5 minutes to 7, and then come back at 7 o'clock and we'll begin hearing from Holly.
We need to get the sign
Yeah, or maybe need to. That was interesting. Sound quality.
He's a great guitarist player.
He's in church, he's in musician too, he must have, just like you.
Oh, okay.
And he's another of those
See,
who,
it's on Facebook.
elders for his
Hey, you. Hi, you. How are you?
Taking my break for a
I
while.
missed you guys. Just smell it, cough my
Just for the sake of brevity.
You know, I was sitting here thinking,
But yeah, so that's.
and I had a good idea. When I ran, I had 9 candidates running. 11 councils.
It should be online, right? Yeah, I'll send you this spreadsheet. Sure, sounds good.
Decisions.
Hey, darling.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm here.
Oh, but it counts for a lot.
Looking back over here, I said, it's pathetic, the number of people that come out to this thing. You know, and it's packed.
Well, you get to vote, right?
You know, it's still.
I agree with you on that.
She's the same age as me. He was there when I was there, when I had my back surgery for 3 months, I was there. He was there. He had a heart attack. They did some stuff with him. He was up
So hopefully that will get better.
Dennis had a stroke 2 years ago.
Energy
saving.
Meetings that got a regular
One in 10 years.
City council
was divided so
They
much.
forget to readjust them.
I don't even know if I can read
Not going there.
Mother had Parkinson's. Mother had Parkinson's. She did a.
Well, it's 7 o'clock, or thereabouts, so we'd like to get started with the mayoral questions as soon as we can. And I can tell you that the ground rules will be the same. So each candidate will have 3 minutes at the beginning to provide an opening statement. Then we will ask some questions. Some of them are the same as the questions that the council heard, and some of them are not. And we will, and those will have 2 minutes. There will be a chance for rebuttal. And then at the end, there will be an opportunity to give a 2-minute closing statement.
There's a gavel up here.
There is a
Chair
gavel
is
there.
for Ken. He's really, don't come after me with that.
No.
I think I got a way to set the alarm.
So I think in the interest of lack of imagination on my part, we'll start in the same order that we, from furthest away to closest. And so Mayor Daines, if you would like to begin with your opening statement.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to thank the citizens of Logan for the opportunity that I've had to serve as mayor over the last 4 years to give back to my community because, I've never liked the word politician. I much prefer public servant. And I think that's the reason, we should get involved in our community is to serve. And again, I've done that for a number of years through the schools and the arts at the university and finally got involved in city council 12 years ago and spent 8 years on the city council. But during the last 4 years, I'm proud of the fact that we have maintained balanced budgets, we've maintained reserves in all strategic funds, and we've had no property tax increases. But in spite of that, we have been able to accomplish a great deal. We've cleaned up South Main Street. We redid Center Street, which has become a wonderful kind of gathering place for downtown. We, last night at City Council, announced new plans for the library, which has been on the wish list for a long, long time. We have Center Block Plaza designed and approved and funded, and we've recently raised $1.5 million in private funds to help offset some of those costs so we can use those redevelopment agency funds for some other things. And again, we've used those redevelopment agency funds are precisely for that. They are for redevelopment. And so I think we've used those funds wisely. We've developed a public art master plan that we'll be rolling out to enhance our downtown as we can with donations and things. I'm really proud of the 47-acre conservation easement, the Kunstler conservation easement that we were able to secure, which will be a legacy project along the river, actually in Keegan's neighborhood in the Woodruff area, that will allow us to access the river and preserve that area and extend our trail system there. We received a grant from the Utah Outdoor Recreation Office to do a blue trail to really try and enhance our river and make that a further amenity for our city. We just recently received a $4.3 million grant from UDOT for the Pedestrian Underpass, which will connect 17 miles of our trail system east to west across that barrier, which is in Main Street. We've done new trail sections. We've worked on infrastructure. I signed the Utah Climate and Clean Air Compact. We're working on replacing dirty vehicles in our fleet to go towards a cleaner fleet, secured new renewable energy for our city portfolio. And I recently signed a letter to the state board that's considering creating new building standards, which could help with a number of air quality issues.
I've reached out and engaged the citizens through neighborhood councils, reinstated that program, and I've appreciated the citizens that have been involved there and that have given me feedback, and we've tried to act and respond to their concerns and questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. D. Jones.
All right. First of all, I want to let everybody know how honored I am to be here, and I want to thank the Bridgerland Audubon Society for putting this on. I think it's wonderful. I have 40 years of business solutions and marketing, and I would like to bring that to the office of the mayor. I want to serve my community. I've lived in Logan my entire life, and I love it. I love the people of Logan. I love the people of Cache Valley, and I think this is a very unique area that we live in, and I would like to keep it that way. I would like to encourage and recruit more business to come to Logan for higher paying jobs, to help the poverty issue that we have here, and there needs to be more transparency from our leaders, and I would like to see more community involvement. I'd like to see more fiscal responsibility, and I want to address the poverty issues. I think it's sad that 63% of the children that attend Logan City School Districts qualify for free lunch, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed immediately, and I have a plan for that. I also have a good plan for downtown revitalization and development, and I want to see representation from all of the neighborhoods and on the city council, and I want to create a as one opportunity with all of the communities in the county so that we can all work better together and create a better place for everyone and make Cache Valley, not just Logan, but Cache Valley, a better place to live and make it a better environment, and that's where I want to go.
Thank you both. Is there anything you'd like to respond to in each other's comments? Not yet? Okay. I'm going to start with a question that you folks have heard a little bit already, to a point, and it's the air pollution question, which, what can I say? If you walk outside, you know why. But air pollution is a significant risk factor for human and bird health, and it is found that there is a significant positive correlation between air quality and quality of life. Last fall, 2020, the City of Logan signed on to the Utah Clean Air Compact. What has been done since then, and do you have any specific plans to address air quality in Logan? Let's start with Dee.
Okay, great. This has been an issue that's been going on for as long as I can remember, and unfortunately, we can't move the mountains, and we can't get big fans on the side of the mountains to blow the air out. But unfortunately, the way we are situated in this valley, we have to work together, and that's where I like my idea of all the communities coming together. I think bringing back e-bikes is a very important thing that we should take a serious look at. I would like to take another serious look at alternative energy, such as solar. I think there's some opportunities for us out there to clean up the air. I think just to say it's all going to be clean and as good as new is not a fair comment, but as more people move into this valley, we need to come up with solutions to cut that down. I think emissions are huge. I think that if we bring back walk to work days, I think would be a good thing to do as a community. We need to work together on this, and if we can just maintain and not let the air get any more worse than it is, I think we'll be in good shape. But again, it's going to take a community involvement, and I think there's a lot of ideas out there that people have that could help the air and help everybody in the valley.
Thank you. Holly?
That is an area that we have been working on. As I mentioned in my opening, I did sign on to the Utah Climate and Clean Air Compact, and at that time, we have had on staff a conservation coordinator who's primarily focused on helping businesses and others conserve energy, because that's your cheapest form of energy. So we actually reworked her job position. She now reports directly to me once a month. She is now the sustainability coordinator for the city. She is working on a greenhouse gas assessment for the city. We purchased some new software to address that. Before, we just didn't have adequate tools to do that. So we've spent some funds to do that, and she's had an intern this summer through Utah State University that's helping her compile that data. So the first thing we need to do is have a metric of where we are so we can address where we need to go and what's important. Again, we reorganized what used to be our, again, Conservation Advisory Board into this RESAB, Renewable Energy Sustainability Advisory Board. And the City Council a number of years ago passed a goal of working toward 50% renewable energy. We're there, is the reality, but we need to continue to improve on that. We've purchased a contract. We had about 20 different power purchase contracts that provide energy for the whole city. We purchased an additional 5 megawatts from the Red Mesa Solar Project, which is a great project. There's another solar project that we're looking at, perhaps purchasing another 5 megawatts of solar. Again, now, at this point, we can't go all renewable. The technology is improving all the time. Once battery storage becomes available, we will be able to move to more solar. We have a member of the RESAB and the Power Board who actually secured a grant for $125,000 or $150,000 to study battery storage, and the city matched that with some funds. So we are actively pursuing how we could maybe improve battery storage so we can expand our solar capacity. Because we still need baseload power 24 hours a day.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question. There's a proposal from the Crockett Canal Company that's currently under study that would divert water from the Logan River below First Dam and pipe it to serve water customers in Logan, North Logan, and Hyde Park. The Logan River Task Force has proposed an alternative that would protect in-stream values of the river within the city by diverting the water after it has flowed through town. Which do you believe is a better solution, or is there some third solution that might be best? And Holly, we'll start with you.
Thank you. And first of all, maybe just a clarification. When they say water customers, they're actually shareholders. And as you probably know, those water rights in the state of Utah go way back, and they are king. So the canal company owns a certain number of shares, and they're entitled to that. I would love to see this potentially turn into a win-win solution, and I love the proposal by the task force. I've suggested it to the engineers as they're evaluating this. Could we somehow leave more water in the river? I mean, we just got a grant for Blue Trail. I mean, we want more water in the river for ecological reasons, for the fish, for the wildlife, appropriate habitat there, as well as, for recreational uses. So I think it could be a real win-win. It might involve some other pumping stations partway through. So I'm looking forward to the report. Again, it's a very lengthy federal process. There's great public input and public comment, and they always come up with a do-nothing option. So there's absolutely nothing decided on at this point. The proposal will come to us, and we will have opportunities as citizens to provide input, but I would love to see that option of keeping more water in the river further, maybe as far as the Square Ponds even, depending on how it works out.
And Dee.
I agree with the mayor. I think the river should go through town. I think a lot of people enjoy it. There's trails, as she mentioned, that go along the river. It's a beautiful river. It doesn't matter where you go in town. A lot of people use that river for recreational activities, for irrigation, for all kinds of stuff. And I think it's very important that that river continues through town and goes to the west. And as she said, even to the Square Ponds.
Thank you.
Okay. Cats. We know that free-range domestic cats kill an estimated 1.324 billion birds a year in the U.S. alone. Logan has gone 3 years without animal control services for cats, and in the previous years it was around 400 cats per year. Logan has grown since then. 400 cats per year who were nuisance cats and transported to the Humane Society. The vast majority of adopted cats require the spay-neuter surgery that we've talked about a little bit already. What do you propose to remedy the longstanding lack of management for stray and feral cats? And we'll start with Dee this time.
Thank you. So I'm a proud pet owner. I love my pets. I think that there is a solution, but this comes down to one word, and one word only. When the word was changed from shall to may. So our animal control officers with the word may are not picking up the cats. And a couple things just kind of strike me. Last week I went and visited the Logan City impound for animals, just out of the blue, and it's small. It was clean, and I was very impressed by the cleanliness of it. They are working on some stuff. But as I started to leave, there was 2 little kittens in cages. And so I asked the young man that's running that, what about these kitties? And he said, well, they were just brought in by some private individuals. We don't pick them up. And I said, are they up for adoption? And he said, no. He said, what we'll do is we'll vaccinate them and then release them back into the wild. And I thought, that is not the solution. That is terrible that you would do that. They should be brought up for adoption. Something should be done with these cats. Even though they're being vaccinated, that's fine, but rabies is rampant in feral cats, and I am afraid that someday a small child will get in contact with one of those cats, and you can die from rabies. And something has to be done. I think animal control officers need to pick up cats. I think when they're brought in, they should be vaccinated and neutered or spayed, and at least given the opportunity to be adopted. So that's where I stand on that. The other thing that happened last week, just off the trail a little bit, I was driving down 200 North, I called it, and an animal control officer passed me, and he had a dead deer tied to the back of his bumper on the animal control truck. And I thought to myself, why are we picking up maggot-infested deer but not cats? And I thought that just doesn't make sense to me. So that's something that we need to address quickly. I know we have a new we have a new shelter, and I'm sorry. We have a new shelter coming, but I'm afraid it won't be big enough. But we'll see, time will tell. And I think there needs to be something done because the feral cats in this town, it's a serious issue. And I know a lot of people don't think cats are an issue, but they're an issue. Sorry.
Thank you for your passion.
Yeah,
I need it.
Sorry.
If I were a citizen and I had a dead deer in my yard, I would be pleased to have that service of someone hauling them off. And oftentimes that is done by the Division of Natural Resources, but they're not always in town. They can't always get to that. So just one thing, that is actually not accurate that for the last 3 years we've been without services for cats. We do have a contract with Canyon View Cares, a new vet, and that's the one that will be servicing the new Cache County Animal Shelter. For the last 7 months, we have done TNR on 2 cats, at least 2 cats a month for the last 7 months. So, and I would question whether they were really just vaccinating and releasing that cat. Typically, there is a neuter and spay that's done. So we have 3 animal control officers. They are some of the busiest officers on our force. And it's always a matter of resources. There are always more things that we'd like to do, be able to do, but we have to prioritize. We respond to complaints, and frankly, we have not been getting a significant number of complaints. Those cats that are TNR, typically, we'll get a call, go set a trap in an area. So if there are specific areas that we need to address, please let us know. But we try and balance overall what we do. And again, we do have services for cats. And we do the best we can. We're not perfect, we don't do everything, but it's a matter of priorities and choices. And if there are a number of people that want us to change those priorities, we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you again.
We have a clarification question, or maybe a slight enhancement question to the last one that I asked about water in the river. The question came from the audience: does the water staying in the river include the Little Logan, which runs through at least 3 parks and enhances property value and enjoyment for residents? Is there, do you have, I guess I would ask if you have your plans for the river would include the Little Logan as part of that. And I can't remember who we started with. I guess we started with Holly. Yeah.
Again, we are simply waiting for the report from the engineering firm that's been engaged to look at this. They did receive a large federal grant to do this. They've taken a lot of public input. So there is no plan at this specific time. We're simply, they're doing calculations on what our options might be, and an option always is to do nothing. So I'm simply waiting for that information so we have good data on what the options might be, what the costs would be, and how we can hopefully make it a win-win. So that's maybe not a direct answer, but I don't think we have a direct answer to that just yet.
Dee, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would encourage that all waterways that run through town stay that way, including the Little Logan. I don't think it should be touched. I think it should be included in with the, going down west of town and then being diverted.
Okay. We do have another question, and so this one will be good. Why is it so hard for a homeowner to find the codes that apply to homeowners in Logan? The planning department was called on the particular issue that was raised, and I don't know what that was, but said that the codes were hard to find. There is a 300-page book to look at. How can we be more transparent for citizens with the kinds of codes that are required? And Dee?
Well, as a citizen and a homeowner, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's difficult to find codes. If any of you have tried, it is a thick book. I've dealt personally with my home and with business as far as codes and zones are concerned. I think there does need to be transparency on that. I think that book needs to be narrowed down quite a bit. I think there's too many. What's the word I'm looking for? But you read the code, and then there's 3 or 4 different sublines with it, and you just can't. You don't know unless you call. You can call and get your answer, but not everybody has that time. They don't have the time for that. But that's a great question, because I have looked through the codes, and it's difficult. And I really, right now, I don't know how you can make that more transparent, other than take away codes and zones, but we can't do that to make the book thinner, right? So I think it's something that needs to be looked at. I think a community involvement on that would be great. A committee of community people, citizens that care and have had to deal with this, I think would be a great idea to start with.
It's true, it's voluminous, and there's a great deal of information there. Again, we try to put a lot of information on the website to be transparent and address that issue, and because of that, sometimes it can be difficult to sort through. The good news is, as was mentioned, we have great staff, we have good city council members. Reach out to me. We will find you the help you need. Staff can explain, they will take the time to do that. So, part of it is just the nature of the law and the legality and the language that has to describe things. So it is a challenge, but we will help you, and our staff is very good at, answering questions, serving the community, and so are the elected officials.
Thank you. This question comes from the ones that were prepared by Audubon members. As the city continues to grow, we have quite a few parks, but some park areas have been rezoned for private development. For example, the half acre of Garth Gardens that has been slated to become a parking lot, or the Deer Pen property where some portions of that on the benches east of 1600 East have been sold for subdivision development. So what is your vision for preservation of green space as the city continues to grow? And I'll begin with you, Holly.
That is one thing that I've really worked hard on. And for instance, the specific example is a half acre in Garth Gardens. That is located in the Wilson neighborhood, which has the highest percentage of parkland in the city. One thing we've discussed is that we have to densify our housing if we're going to not sprawl. So that was a trade-off, for instance, and then, but we've worked on the 47-acre conservation easement down on the west side along the river where that's really prime property to try and preserve. You mentioned the land that was sold up in the Deer Pen area. Again, we also need homes and families to come to our schools, as Dee mentioned. And so a portion of that land was sold, but the trade-off was that there will be a nature park of 23 acres. That will make it, one of the largest parks in the city. We've worked with the neighborhood on their input on what they want that to be and what we can do. So, and we have an October 4th meeting with that Hillcrest Neighborhood Council meeting scheduled for the designer, which is BioWest, to come back and present some options so then we can get further feedback. Now that's not funded yet, but the first step is design so we know what is involved and then we can develop a budget and work toward that. Again, in the west side of town, the Woodruff neighborhood, as we're closing the landfill, that is a tremendous amount of acreage. And we've also had a meeting recently, I think it was May, with the Woodruff Neighborhood Council, where we presented a potential design, asked for their comment and input. That includes a 50-acre proposed wetland and nature trail, again, preserving some wetland areas, and then there are also some more manicured park areas. There's some potential, a disc golf, a neighborhood park, a dog park. Again, these are all potential plans that we don't have funding for, but we're in the planning process. We're being proactive. We have a vision of preserving that for the future, and I think those are really important. So again, there are always trade-offs, and I think if you look at my track record, I have a pretty good track record for supporting preservation of open space, additional parks and trails, expanding that trail network. So,
thank you. Dee, what's your vision for preservation of green space?
Well, actually, a 23-acre nature park is a great idea. I didn't know about that. So if that happens, that's a great idea. I think one thing we need to look at and take a serious look at is we need to slow the flow on apartment buildings around this city. There's just too much construction on apartments. There needs to be more permanent housing, is what I would call it, to give families more security and a place to stay. Apartments, they're not a living space where people will stay. But anyway, along with that, I think what the plans are. I was at that meeting at the Woodruff, and I think your idea is a great idea. I think I would bypass I forget what it is, but anyway, I think a park down there would be a wonderful idea. I think the plans that I saw looked really good for green space, and I think green space is huge. I was very disappointed when the land got sold at the Deer Pens because I thought that was very, I'm going to say, valuable land as far as nature. But I was not for that, but it happened, and that's what we're going to do with it. I think green space will come into play as, and this might not make sense, but green space will come into play as the city grows. I think there's going to be certain places, like the mayor talked about, where the park is going to go down by Woodruff. I think we need to look at more situations like that, but before we do that, we need to clean up and maintain the parks that we have. And so before we start looking at other areas for parks, we need to take a look at the parks that we have and get them cleaned up, and then start maybe pushing towards more parks down the road. But right now, I think the main discussion needs to be the apartment buildings that are being built all over and taking that green space.
May I have a rebuttal?
Sure.
3 points there. First of all, the Deer Pen property was purchased by the city for a cemetery, and that entire acreage was intended to be a cemetery. When it became clear that we do not have a need for that anytime down the road, it was a compromise. What's the best solution? Of course, you know, can we afford to do the entire thing open space? We needed to repay the cemetery perpetual care fund, and that's one area we need to work on. Our cemetery needs some work, and that property was sold for a very good price because it's prime home area and those homes will benefit schools. But that money goes directly back into the cemetery perpetual care fund. We're doing a master plan for the cemetery, and that money will go to create a new irrigation system for the cemetery. Point 2, the comment about clean up and maintain the parks we have. We have impeccable parks, and I'm really impressed with our staff. We have been so short-handed on part-time staff this summer, but they've still managed to do that. So I would disagree on that. I think we do a great job. And the other thing is the housing. Again, it's always a trade-off. Do we want to sprawl? Logan is landlocked. We don't have a lot of room for additional development. So one thing we can do is densify. It does give younger people with limited income a starting point. And again, you know, maybe they can move into a home, but we also, you know, where do we put those homes? Do we continue to sprawl, or do we try and densify around services, around infrastructure where people can walk and access services and bicycle? So those are the trade-offs you have to make all the time.
May I?
Yes, Dee, you have the last one here.
Yeah, the only thing that I disagree with, well, there's a few things, but the main thing I disagree with on apartments is it doesn't give a family a home. And when you live in an apartment and you're paying rent, you can get up and leave anytime you want. There's no security, there's no home ownership. And I would like to see young couples have an opportunity to have home ownership. And I think it can be done. It's happened in other cities. I've seen it, I've watched it, and it can happen. The other thing is, as far as the parks and trails, all anybody needs to do is just just drive by the Riverside Trail, which is between Center Street and Sumac Drive, and take a look at that. Because 5 years ago, that thing was immaculate. And I think the city spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to clean that up, and it looked great. And right now, it looks the exact same as it did before they started it. It's an eyesore. And then when you walk along the trails, you know, you've got a lot of tall grass around sign poles, you've got around trees. There needs to be some trimming, there needs to be, you know, and I know you're shorthanded, and I understand that.
And it's a trail, we're around, you know.
But the Riverside Trail is probably the worst.
And which do you mean by the Riverside Trail?
It's the Riverside Trail that's between Center Street and Sumac. Right along the river.
Little tiny one.
You know when you cross the river to go
A little
up?
tiny one. No, that little one that's right on the river where the road and center.
Anyway, my point was, you know, there are some opportunities there to clean up the parks and the trails, and I think it should be done.
Great, thanks.
We're going to move back to environmental oriented issues for a moment. Climate change models, as well as the current drought, point to a shortage of water for Logan and other cities in Cache Valley. I know we've been on water already, but let's keep going. As a mayor, what measures do you think should be enacted to reduce water use in the city? If any. If any. We'll start with Dave, please.
With me?
Please.
Okay. I would like to see, as was brought up earlier, incentives. I think that would be one way to start this. Droughts are obviously something we can't control, but we can obviously manage. So I would like to see incentives. I would like to see water days. I would like to see scheduled water days, and then I would like to look into more feasibility of maybe some more water storage treatment centers, maybe one. This kind of a drought comes along, I don't know how many years, but it's pretty far between, but we need to be prepared for the next one. And this one is far from over. So I think it's going to take some responsibility and a lot of community involvement to get through it and maybe come up with some solutions with, again, community involvement and transparency of how we can all come together and fix this problem.
Thank you. One of the big major infrastructure projects on our radar is a $20 million water storage tank that we do need to work towards, and we're looking at maybe using some of our American Rescue Plan funds, our COVID funds toward that, but that will be a big infrastructure investment for the city in the future. But we are blessed to have a number of water sources. We have DeWitt Springs, and then we have 4 different wells in the city that do very well. Again, we don't know the long-term impact of the drought, so we need to be addressing that. And so far, this year, we chose to be very proactive and ask people to voluntarily cut back on watering. We sent out guidelines on specific recommendations on number of days, how frequently you need to water, possibly let your lawn go dormant, the length to cut it. So we've tried to provide proactive information to our residents. We do have a 2-tiered rate structure already, so people that use more water pay more, and research by Dr. Courtney Flint at Utah State University through the extension. I mean, she's done research that shows that is the best way to get people to conserve water. So maybe that's something we have to look at in the future. Maybe we have additional tiers to try and encourage conservation, but it is a serious problem, and we'll see if it, hopefully it snows a lot this winter.
And starts tomorrow.
Yeah, I could use a little coolness myself. Thank you both.
We've come to the pie in the sky question, the same one we asked the city council. So again, what that question was, so the 2022 City of Logan budget is nearly $200 million. If Logan received a $1 million grant to use for the city in any way that you wanted, what would you do with it? And Holly, we'll start with you.
I talked about those 2 parks that were in design, which, again, the first step is to design. Just the design has, significant costs. But that will be the next challenge, is how do we get that open space paid for, created into a natural area. So that's where I would use it, is on those 2 new park areas, one being, well, both of them having significant natural areas as well as some other amenities for the winter.
Thanks. Indeed.
I would, part of the money would go towards a homeless shelter, because we need one very bad. And then the rest of it, whatever's left over, I would allocate towards local charities in the city.
Thanks.
Okay. We have come to the spot where we would really, really like more questions from the audience. Really, really, really.
No one minds if the meeting ends early.
Why do you think I retired? Okay. Are there more questions from all y'all? I'm going to recycle one, if I may. What can you provide to Logan that, I'm going to say your competitor cannot? I'm going to start with you.
Well, that's a great question, because it sounds to me like we're thinking along the same kind of lines here for a minute. But anyway, I've lived in, like I said earlier, I've lived in Logan my whole life. The city's given me ample opportunities, and I appreciate every one of them. And I just want to give back. It's time for me to give back. And what I bring to the table is 40 years of business solutions and marketing. I can balance a budget. I've done it before, and many times before. I can manage people. I've managed up to 1,200, well, maybe 1,300 people at one time. I've spoken in front of large crowds. I am just very passionate about the city, and I just want this. I think as good as it is here, I think it can be better. I would like to see more focus, like I said, on the people that are struggling in this city. I think there needs to be more focus on housing. I think there needs to be a little more, a lot more transparency. And I just am just ready and I'm willing and I'm able to be the mayor, because I've been planning this for a very long time.
Thank you.
With me, I think you know what you're getting. I have a good track record over the past 4 years, and I have a vision for the city, and I have been able to get things done. I think you've seen the significant projects that we've been able to accomplish, which are legacy projects for our community. So if you share my vision and like what you've seen, I would ask for your vote. I've kept my campaign promises. I do what I say I'll do. I work really hard. I have a really strong work ethic, and I'm good at pulling people together and creating partnerships and leveraging creative solutions and leveraging funding to actually achieve the vision. So again, I work hard. We have a great team, and I work well with them. They've been extremely helpful and supportive. Our city council has been great. We have an excellent working relationship. So again, I've been able to pull citizens, groups, organizations together to really focus on making our city, which is a wonderful place to live, an even better place, and to improve our quality of life going forward. Thank you.
Well, it sounded as though.
We got one.
We got one, okay.
Okay, I'll come in clutch.
Great. So we've heard mention of transparency fairly often during the last couple hours. How and where would you increase transparency? And I've lost track of who. Start with Holly.
One thing we've been working on is, I've been talking to Kurt Jensen, our redevelopment, City Economic Development Director, about putting more information on the website. And that's been mentioned previously. I think it's a good suggestion. Everything we do through the redevelopment agency is done in a public meeting. So documents are sent out in the packet to the press, to whomever is on our press list. You know, our meetings are public. We do our business in the public. It's required by state law, and we think it's excellent practice, and we do that. We try and put a great deal of information on the website. People have requested that we do more in terms of that, because we do sometimes go through large sums. But I would like to correct one thing in terms of the $16 million that was mentioned in the redevelopment agency. Our budget this year is $3,230,000 for what's budgeted in the redevelopment agency. So I'm not quite sure where that number came from, but we can do a better job there. We should do a better job. But again, we're always open. If you call myself, city council members, staff, we will help you find the information they need, because it is your information. You are the taxpayers, you are the citizens, we respond to you, and we really are you can have anything you want because it's your information.
Well, the first thing I would do is, open door policy, of course, and I would have no closed door meetings with the city council. I know that there's rules and whatnot on some of that, but when you do have, I guess I have a question before I even say anything like that. Is there a moderator in the room when you do that?
There's state law that says if you can only have 2 city council members in a meeting where it's considered a public meeting, and then it's open to the public. And we are very careful about, abiding by that.
Yeah, I would just, I don't know, I would recommend a moderator in the room just to be safe. That's just me though. It's just the environment I come from. Sorry.
Yeah, we have staff meetings, again, sometimes before we're ready to bring something to the public, we need to get a sense of where the city council members are. So I may meet individually with 1 council member at a time or 2, but again, we are extraordinarily cautious about, they're called sunshine laws, open meeting laws.
Okay.
I fully support those laws.
Okay, so like I said, I would be really careful on a closed door meeting. And then also, I think there needs to be more transparency on where our tax dollars are going. I try to attend as many city council meetings as I can, and if I'm not here, I'm usually watching it on the stream, but it just doesn't seem to me like there's not enough information being given out about where the tax dollars are going. And just for example, you mentioned that the library is funded. The library is funded. But I was at a meeting where you passed that $4 million would be borrowed from utilities to the library fund. To me, that's not funded. That's just you borrowed some money and it needs to be paid back. Stuff like that needs to be more open and out for the public, just so we can have some more community involvement and let somebody have some, some say in it. It's like I'm all for, city council representation from all the neighborhoods, and I think that would alleviate a lot of that. But anyway, that's where I'm at on that.
Just a quick.
Yeah, Holly, it looks like you had something you wanted to add to that.
For instance, on the library, that is part of the funding plan. Yes, we are borrowing money from, we have a number of enterprise funds, for instance, light and power, electric fund, so that money is either invested in the public treasurer's fund, or as a city, we can legally borrow it, and then we have a repayment stream. As you noticed on your tax bill, there is a line item for the library. So there's a funding stream to repay that. It is, again, done in a public meeting with documentation. And again, it is a big budget. It can be complicated. You're welcome to sit in on the city council public. It's interesting, we pass a budget of the size that you mentioned. Do you know how many public comments we had on the budget? 0. But the city council members, I prepare it and present it. They go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Our finance director, again, is great to answer specific questions about anything. I mean, there is hard copy budget in the library. The full budget is online. We've actually received awards from government accounting, sort of agencies for our openness, our transparency, our CAFR, our Consolidated Annual Financial Report, is very specific online, it's open to the public. So we are very transparent with budgetary facts.
But like I said, if I may, if the money is borrowed, it's not funded. Walk me through that.
Well, when you buy a home, you borrow money for a mortgage,
That's
and
right.
the home's funded. You have a plan to
I still
pay
have
for
to
it.
pay it back.
Yes.
So it's really not funded.
Well, again, with the
The
home.
bank owns my home.
Well, the city owns it, it pays for it.
Okay. We had a question earlier about water, and we mostly focused on homes and homeowners. This question asks about, are there or should there be any incentives for businesses to conserve water? And also, are there or should there be plans for water-wise planting and other ways to reduce the amount of water used by our city parks? And Holly, I'll start with you.
Again, we do try and be cognizant of that. Part of what, we have a variety of parks. Again, we have natural parks that don't have turf. A lot of the recreation amenities that people have like turf, and that takes water. We cut back significantly on watering our parks this summer in the drought. You may have noticed brown spots coming up. We did what we were asking the public to do. And we pay a pretty significant water bill. So again, as you're dealing with budgets and, the long-term cost of your park and recreation programs, that's one thing we do need to look at to see if we can reduce it further, just like everyone else that we're asking to look at those issues.
I guess my answer to that question would be, I think it was you that came up with yellow is the new green, which.
I think that was the state slogan that we borrowed, but.
I have patches of yellow, it kind of looks good. But anyway, to answer the question, I drive by, let's just take the Mount Logan Middle School, for example, and it seems like that lawn is getting watered every single day, along with some of our parks. And there were signs a while ago around the middle school lawn that said, to the effect, Logan City Canal water, this
Field water. They
Field
They have
water.
shares and specific water rights that
Okay,
come
so
out.
I guess my question is, what's the difference between the field water that's going on Mount Logan Middle School's lawn and the field water that's going on my lawn?
Yours is culinary water because you probably don't have water shares. And one thing as a city that we've tried to do, for instance, the cemetery used to be culinary water. We have now switched that over. We have a new pump station and we're using water shares. And that was part of the reason that particular property was being watered during the day. We share those water shares with Utah State. They also have canal water rights. And again, just given the amount of time and the pressure to serve those lines, someone had to water during the day. And because the cemetery has these really old valves, our staff has to go around and put physical, big rainbirds in, and it takes a whole week to water the cemetery. So that's one thing, again, we want to address with this new, this new watering system. It will be canal water, which preserves our culinary, and it will be easier to maintain and to,
Okay, I was just wondering why that would be, because we're in a drought. And there seems to be water in the canal, but there's not water in the river. So it's kind of a, we're preaching, yellow is the new green, watch where you what, but every day, it just doesn't seem like a very good example to me. Whether the water's coming from a canal or the river or wherever, I just don't, when we're trying to get our citizens to not water their lawns, it doesn't make sense to me to drive by Mount Logan Middle School and see this nice plush lawn with huge water sprinklers going on.
and that's the middle school. That has nothing to do with the city.
Well, it's the
just-
parks too. I just using that for an example.
Well, part of our golf course does have water shares and part of the cemetery has water shares. Again, is that something we could possibly do in the future, is switch from non-culinary to water shares? Because the city does have significant shares, but all water users across the county, the irrigators, everyone was asked to cut back. So those people that are irrigating crops can have enough, and we all cut back, even though we did still use shares.
Sure. Okay. Wasn't my question, but I understand.
So we're coming close to the end,
That's the same.
and we are out of questions, but that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. We appreciate all of you coming and being here. We appreciate the time that all of the candidates, you two most recently and the previous candidates, spent thinking about the questions that we asked. And we appreciate that you really care about Logan. Those of us who do not live in Logan care about Logan too, because it is a center of where the community comes to, where the county comes to.
With that, I think we should thank Holly Danes and Dee Jones, and I want to thank the audience for your attention, and let's clap for everyone.